Good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Okay. Well, like I was just telling Garrett, this is a little unusual because he's my boss and usually he has to do these for me. So now it's a little bit reversed. So, thank you again for coming to this very special Sunday afternoon lecture series. Usually it's held on the third Sundays. We've had to change it around so we could meet our speaker's schedule, but that's no problem because he is bringing an action-packed, or at least a very curious talk to you today. So, who is our speaker? Well, it's Garrett Channel, like I said, my boss, my good friend and colleague over at the Salem Museum. He's a graduate of Roanoke College and studied history with a focus in public history. He also studied history and literature at Oxford University. He recently completed a master's degree in museum studies from Harvard University. During his time at Roanoke, Garrett worked with preservation-focused institutions, including the Roanoke College Archives and the Library of Congress in their preservation division. He volunteered at the Salem Museum in their archives and at events prior to being hired, and served as the Director of Education and Archives for 3 years. He now develops content and programs for all ages, curates the museum's collection, and oversees the museum's daily operations. Without further ado, please give a hand to Garrett Channel.
Well, good afternoon, y'all. Thank you for coming out. Weather couldn't be better for today's topic of conversation, so we'll take it for that. Thank y'all for having me. Like Hunter said, I am from the Salem Museum, so we are just up the road from y'all about an hour. We're right on Main Street in Salem, and so we sort of serve the history of Salem and Roanoke County, but also Southwest Virginia more broadly, and so that kind of is what brings me today down to Southwest and Southside Virginia. And so I'm going to be talking to y'all about the ghost tales and cryptids from the area. And so we're going to go through a few different stories throughout our time together today, and I know that there are going to be more stories than I have time to cover, so if you know other things, I'm not trying to skip over the stuff you already know, I only have so much time. But we're going to do the ghost stories first, and then have a local legend we'll talk about, and then we'll get into some of the cryptids and stuff. And if you don't know what that word means yet, don't worry, we'll get there. But I wanted to start off, one of the ways that I decided to frame what I'm talking about today, because we're in historic Martinsville, which is located within historic Henry County, which at one time was part of Patrick Henry County, so this was all Patrick Henry's land. And so part of what I'm going to do for this talk is we're actually going to start with Patrick County stuff, and I'm going to do some Henry County stuff, and I'm going to do some Martinsville specific stuff. So we're getting stuff from all over the area, so no matter where in Henry County you live, if you are from or if you have family out in Patrick County, kind of covering all of that, what is the historic region of the area. And so I was actually going to start out in Patrick County with the Mountain Rose Inn. So it was first built in 1901 in Woolwine in Patrick County. And it was built by a man named Joe Dehart, and he was a whiskey seller. So he had a whiskey distillery, Mountain Rose Distillery. And so he was known as this very jovial man. He was always quick with a laugh and a smile and to greet people and of course to sell them his wares. Of course, one of the big things that really affected him, if he's beginning in the early 1900s, is just a couple of decades into that, Prohibition begins. And so he was known for saying that when writing was on the wall, Prohibition was coming, and I know y'all just had a whole talk on that last month of the local distilling history, but he said, quote, "Good whiskey will be hard to procure, so it won't be a bad idea to lay away a 10-year supply of corn whiskey, strictly for medicinal purposes, of course." And he was happy to supply that to the people as well. Now, of course, because he had a registered and recognized distillery, he was not able to continue that during Prohibition, and so he was working more on, and at one point he had moved the distillery to a different part of Patrick County, but then went back to Woolwine, and so during Prohibition and then after, he never continued with the whiskey. He always had a glass of it after he retired, but he was mainly making flour and meal and vinegar and things like that. But he returned back to his house here, so this was the mansion that he built. And today it is an inn, so bed and breakfast, but apparently he is still around today. He passed away in 1956, and the legend is that it is still him that is there in the house, because people hear footsteps and stuff, but for especially upstairs on the second floor, right behind one of the windows there on the balcony is where he had his rocking chair, so he could sit and look out the windows. And apparently, people hear those footsteps, and then suddenly that chair starts rocking. And so they think that Joe is still around, still just as happy that people are there enjoying his home just as he did back in his day, and is keeping an eye on the estate. The next one that we have is the Poor Farmer's Farmhouse near Meadows of Dam. And so this was an 1800s cabin, and this was very common at the time. You have a cabin that's built in the early 1800s, mid-1800s. By late 1800s, early 1900s, they're going to take all the wood from that and turn it into a farmhouse. This was very common practice throughout Virginia and the South and all over the place. And so same thing happened out here. And by the 1990s, it was actually a bit of a boarding house. So people would get to, as people were traveling along, they could stay there, kind of like an inn, but could have longer stays. And so all sorts of things have been recorded there since about the mid-1900s. Mainly people hearing voices, sounds from the walls. There was one woman who came up to that innkeeper in the 90s and was like, "Have the walls ever talked to you here in the house?" Because that's what she experienced while staying there for the night. People have had their beds shook, but especially one of the main things is people have seen the apparition of a woman. So both of the innkeepers, there's an innkeeper and a groundskeeper, both of them would see this vision of a blonde woman in a blue gown, and they would notice her, they would turn to look on her fully, and she would disappear, just like that. And it was this big, conundrum for a while of who is this. But what happened sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a tombstone that was found. They were digging a ditch for some stormwater runoff. And they found a tombstone of a woman named Rosina Connor. And so they found Rose's grave, Rosina Connor's grave, and suddenly that apparition wasn't appearing as much. And so it's believed that that was her, and she was trying just to send a message that, hey, her burial was forgotten here. Remember that she was one of the original inhabitants of that cabin that was there before. And so we see all these ways throughout Southwest Virginia of all these ways that history just keeps coming back, and the families that lived here. And even though you're reusing the houses, there was still a family that lived there beforehand. The last one that I have for you as far as Patrick County goes is the Reynolds Homestead. So this is on the National Register of Historic Places. It was built in the mid-1840s. It is most well known for being the birthplace of R.J. Reynolds, R.J. Reynolds Tobacco. One of the big things of Patrick County was the tobacco. And so people have felt all sorts of different presences and apparitions in it. Seen apparitions, rather. In fact, there's a lot of male apparitions that people have seen. In the 1990s, there was an artist in residence who was staying in the Reynolds homestead, and she woke up in the middle of the night to this man standing next to her bed, and he grabbed her arm and would not let it go. And so finally, she just looked up and said, "Sir, I'm staying here for a while. We need to be able to coexist and work together." And with that, he let go of his arm and just disappeared. And she never had any other issues while she was staying there while being the artist. But people have seen all sorts of things there. In fact, there are cold spots, in the library especially. There are cold spots, and people smell smoke. Not just cigar smoke or pipe smoke or something like that. Our very first story, that's another thing that people will smell Joe's cigar smoke. Well, apparently they just smelled smoke, like fire smoke in there. So not quite sure what happened with that so far, but we have all these things that are happening within that house and presences that people are feeling while they're in there. The next one, we're moving on to Danville area, so another very historic area of the surrounding counties. And so this was built in 1859 for Major William Sutherland. This is the house, if you don't know, this is the house that Jefferson Davis stayed at. So Danville being the last capital of the Confederacy, this is the house he was staying in. Now, he was giving his proclamations from other places, but this is where he was at. And supposedly people who are passing by on the streets, they will see a man, a translucent man, staring out at them from the windows. So they see him, they smell cigar smoke in the dining room here as well. There are sounds of different people talking. There's supposedly a little girl who's crying, and you'll hear her in the next room over, but then when you go to investigate, there's no one there. And people have actually seen reflections in the mirror of either a woman or this little girl, one of the two. And so you have all this activity that's happening just in this one house. And so some people also said they've seen Sutherland himself. I didn't see anything other than that Jefferson Davis stayed there, but they've seen Sutherland as well as this woman and a couple of children who they hear crying. And today it is the home of their museum down there, and so, or one of the museums down there. And so you have the Sutherland Museum, or Sutherland Mansion. On Main Street, apparently you can see soldiers walking through town still. People have reported driving by in their cars and they think, oh, there's some sort of reenactment or something going on. And then suddenly these soldiers turn, they walk down an invisible sidewalk and then disappear into one of the houses, just walk through the wall. It's like, well, guess it's not a reenactment because I don't think any living people could do that today. So, not quite the same. And then the last one is the Lanier House. So this was built in 1830 for Danville's first mayor, Captain James Lanier. I think I'm saying that right. And people hear footsteps from him still being in the house. You can be downstairs and hear conversations happening throughout the house, and then again, no one else is home. Once again, very common. They smell the cigar smoke from all the men hanging out within the house. And today it is an insurance office for Garrett and Garrett. This is another one of the big spots, and you will also see Confederate soldiers walking in and out of the basement doors of this house on the backside as well. Now, bringing it back a little bit closer to home, getting into Martinsville ghost story. And this is my next to last ghost story, but we're going to come back to the other one at the end. So the Sam Lyon Trail. So if y'all are familiar with the Sam Lyon Trail, that is here in one of the local neighborhoods. And so the Forest Park neighborhood is where apparently a lot of the Sam Lyon Trail is today. Supposedly this is a picture of part of the path that Sam Lyon was sent to help clear out. So who was Sam Lyon? So he was an enslaved person who was bought by one of the Harstons from the local area. And so that was likely, because we're in the old courthouse, that was likely in this courtyard out here in front of us, in front of the museum today. But he was purchased. He was actually the son of a chieftain in Africa, and then captured, brought to the United States. And so when he was walking to the Harston's property, he stumbled, and one of the overseers, who was a man named Red Tupper, called out, quote, "Watch it there, Sam." And from then on, he became known as Sam, and they gave him Lion because he was the descendants from one of these chieftains. And so they named him African Lion, and so Sam Lyon. And so what ends up happening is he is set out to help with clearing paths. And so a lot of the paths that are in the area, in the woods and surrounding parks and stuff, were cleared out by these enslaved persons in the county. And so this is one of the paths that apparently he helped with. But this Red Tupper, so Tupper was his real last name. He was called Red because he had bright red head hair. And so he was particularly cruel and would just, hit the slaves, abuse them, just cause. And so what ended up happening is Sam was working one day, and Red Tupper laid into him, and he didn't speak English very well, of course, it was second language. And so he looked at him and said, "If beat again, we'll kill." And Red Tupper just laughed at him. The next day, Sam was working, he had his pickaxe, and then and a lot of times whenever you're moving rocks and stuff like this, you'd have a chain that you'd wrap around that rock and then help you to pull it and move it. And so he had a chain and he had his pickaxe, and he dropped the chain, he bent over to pick it up, and Red Tupper hit him. And so he apparently bellowed, "Not believe," and then got up, hit him with that pickaxe. Now, of course, that was not popular to attack your slave master, and so Sam was sentenced and was hung for it. But apparently Sam can still be seen today. So he is still out wandering the wilderness. Now, the other thing that I'll mention, I skipped a step there, sorry, is that he did escape after that initially happened. He ran off into the woods and lived in different caves and lived off of the land, just eating the different natural berries and hunting, and lived for 3 years in the local area. And so he was eventually captured, and this is all true, this is documented in court records. He lived for 3 years after that, just in the Forest Park area. And so today, apparently he is still seen wandering around where he lived for those 3 years. So people have still seen him, they've reported seeing him wandering around in what's today Martinsville. So he's one that's still around. Now, like I said, I have one more ghost story, but we're going to come back to that one. We have a local legend that I want to talk about. This is not necessarily a ghost story, but a local legend. And I'm sure many of y'all have heard of this, the local Beaver Creek Plantation. And so you have the Harstons are there. And apparently, Marshall Harston, the one who lived there, he liked to be able to stand at the window and overlook and see all the workers and the enslaved workers working within his field, oversee what they were doing. So apparently one day there was a rainstorm, and he was standing there at that window when lightning struck one of the trees that was outside. And so, I don't know if y'all know, but basically the way that the glass was made back in the 1800s was very similar to the glass that was being made for pictures, for taking photographs. And so supposedly what ended up happening, the legend is that lightning struck and it was like a camera flash. And so it captured his image on that window of one of the upstairs windows. And so when the sun hits it just right, if you're looking at it on the right kind of day, with just the right amount of light, you can actually see the outline of Marshall Harston still standing there to this day. And so I know that's one of the big local legends, so I definitely wanted to make sure to mention that one, because that's one that I know is still circulated today. But that's one of your local legends that you have in the area. And so we kind of transitioned from the ghosts into the legends. So now I want to talk a little bit more about the cryptids of the area. So everyone know what a cryptid is, what that word means. All right. In case we don't, cryptid is basically an animal that there is tons of evidence of, so first-hand account, people that have interacted with it, encountered it, but there is no physical scientific proof. There is no skeleton, there is no animal remains, anything like that. That's a cryptid. So think the Loch Ness Monster. Think Bigfoot, stuff like that. Those are your cryptids. And so there are actually several of them because we are in the heart of Appalachian Mountains here. There are plenty of these stories from throughout Appalachian culture, Appalachian folklore. So I'm going to tell y'all about the ones that are actually from here and from this area and region. So one of the first ones, very common one, is the Wampus cat. Has anyone heard of the Wampus cat before? All right. So your Wampus cat is this lovely six-legged cat that you can see here. It's depicted either with 4 or 6 legs. The name comes from catawampus, which today is an old southern term for like catty corner or something like that. But back in the day, it was an unimplied sound that you heard coming from the woods. So just if you heard some unknown creature, this is the early settlers coming over, and then as they're exploring further and further west, going further into the woodland, you hear some sort of sound, you don't know exactly what it is, but it's clearly some sort of creature, you just call it a catawampus. Well, that name eventually evolved into being the wampus, and specifically these local cats. So, what do they look like? They are these large, they're kind of like a mountain lion, but they have these green eyes. Again, usually they'll be depicted with six legs. They have huge fangs, and they can walk upright. And that's usually one of the first telltale signs that you're seeing, not seeing a mountain lion, you're seeing a wampus cat, is if it is walking upright. They have these huge front arms, and supposedly they can stretch them out, they can like hyperextend them. So this is a more comical version from a Lumberjack Tales book from the early 1900s. But apparently they can be on the top of mountains and then swipe birds just out of the sky that are in mid-flight, passing by them. And so one of the ways that you know that you hear them is whenever you hear, apparently they have a terrible, terrible scream. So they, it's the horrible piercing scream that you hear in the dead of the night, and apparently it sounds like nothing else. But if you hear this awful scream, kind of not quite human, but some sort of feral animal, it's a wampus cat. So that's one that has been spotted all throughout the region, throughout southern Virginia, all throughout Appalachia. So a very common one. Again, some of y'all have heard of it before, so clearly grew up with those legends as well. One of the ones that not as many people are familiar with is the legend of dogmen. So basically, they're kind of like werewolves, except instead of having that transformation on the full moon, it's just permanent. They're always a dog man. The other thing, this is what I have depicted here, is it's more of the body of a man, but then has the head of a dog. And so this is a 1493 depiction from Germany. I like this one a little bit better because it shows more of a human figure just with a dog's head, as opposed to being like a werewolf or whatever. Common throughout Appalachia, but there have been documented sightings in our local area. So one came in 1990. There was one out in Danville. And so a woman her yard was right up against the wood line, and so something came from the woods. She had her dog chained up in the backyard. Somebody came and drug her dog away. So she called the police, didn't see anything, just knew something and got it. So she called the police. Police came to investigate. He took the police officer, the sheriff on call, took a couple of steps into the woods. He heard a twig snap somewhere to his right. So he looks over and he sees this dog man standing there. He shoots at it, is able to just nick it sort of on the forehead eye area, and it lets out this terrible howl and just turns around and runs away on all fours. And so leaves the dog behind. The dog was safe after that. So the dog lives, we're good. But that was one of the sightings. The other one, very recent. I prefer whenever legends are a little bit further back. If it's further back in history, you can kind of separate it a little bit. It's more interesting and fun when it's like the 70s to 90s. It's like, okay, that was still a time ago, so maybe it's gone by now. But in 2017, which is very recent, there was a dogman sighted in Henry County. And it was it was running. It was on one of the back roads in the woods, not specified exactly where, but somewhere, assumedly on 220 or one of the side roads. And someone was driving along, and just all of a sudden out of the woods came this human figure with a dog's head, did not break stride, ran into the road, jumped, front paws onto the top of the car's hood, used that to launch itself, cleared the car, and kept running into the woods. 2017. Way too soon for my comfort. Way too recent. But y'all have that to have fun and look and see if you see on your way home today.
That might have just been my brother.
There you go. So that's one that y'all have that is not overly common. I mean, dogmen are again, this is a 1493 depiction, very common throughout history, especially in European folklore, but not one we necessarily hear about all the time. Now, my next story is actually, you do have a local Sasquatch sighting. It's just the one. It was in Fielddale, specifically, so I drove through Fielddale to get here today. And so this is not a picture from that sighting. This is in Virginia, though. This was up in Hampton Roads area. So this is a Virginia Sasquatch sighting, if you believe it. I didn't do my disclaimer at the beginning that this is a talk for skeptics and believers alike. So if you're just here for fun stories, that's great. If you're here because you believe it, that's equally great. But in 1982, there was a gentleman in Fielddale who got up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. Woke up, feeling a little restless, went downstairs, got a drink of water, was standing by his back door, looking out, and he saw this huge figure walking away from his house. And so he had motion lights, so the porch lights were on, and he saw this figure walking away, and it was huge. You could tell it was huge, it was humanoid, and it was hairy, covered in thick dark fur. And so he watches it walk away, and it gets to the road that's back behind us, about 100 yards back from his house was a street. And apparently this thing was able to clear that road in one stride. It was able to get completely over the road. So okay, this was massive. And you could tell just from the description, it was clearly some sort of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, take your pick a term. So then the next morning, and he kind of puts it out of his mind, he's like, you know what, it's the middle of the night, I'm tired, whatever, maybe it was just a dream. Well, the glass is still on his nightstand the next morning, so he did get up for the glass of water, but maybe he just dreamed that part. Well, then he goes next door. He lived next to his grandparents. So he goes next door and he's talking to his grandmother. And he tells her this story about what he saw. And she's like, oh, I saw something too. I saw a man standing outside of my window. Granted that this was a 4-foot tall window on the second floor. So this creature was about 8 foot tall, which even by Bigfoot standards is big. They're usually about 6 to 10 feet. So this is sort of right in the middle there, but they're usually more like 6, 7 foot whenever you read about sightings. So this is about 8 foot tall Bigfoot. Again, 1982, a little bit better than that 2017 sighting. But there have been Sasquatch sightings right here, just outside of Martinsville in the local area. And so, all right. Now, this is what I was most excited about talking about today. So how many of y'all have heard of Sasquatch or Bigfoot before today? Just about everyone's hand goes up. Has anyone ever heard of a sheep squatch before? Okay, we have a couple. Cool. You never get to talk about sheep squatch. They're really, really rare. Sheep squatch, actually, their first sightings only happened in about the mid-1990s. They were seen in West Virginia, over more on the Ohio area. And there's been sightings since then. And y'all have had one out here in Ferrystone National Park. So in Ferrystone, so this is sheep squatch. This was the best image I could get. There hasn't been any, we don't have any pictures or footage of it like we have of Bigfoot. So it's just a rendering. But basically think Bigfoot, but sheep's wool or white fur instead, and then these big ram or goat type horns. And that's what a sheep squatch is. Otherwise, you can pretty much just think about your Sasquatch, change the skin to be a little bit more closer to this. That's your sheep squatch. And so there was one scene in 2014 in Ferrystone National Park. So again, a little close, only a decade ago. But 2014 Ferrystone National Park, there were a couple of hikers who were going on. They were on the path. They were on one of the side trails. It wasn't necessarily the main path, but one of the side trails. And they see something moving about 50 feet in front of them. So they're going uphill at that point. So they see something uphill. And they see something moving in the woods. They're not sure what it is. And then one of them notices that it goes through a small clearing, and there's enough sunlight going through. Okay, so this is pretty large. It seems to be standing upright, and it's white fur. What could that be? And then what happens is it gets to a clearing, and it gets up onto this rock that's there, and it's standing there surveying the area, basically, just looking over the surrounding area. And they see what you see here. They see the big white creature with the ram's horns. It's got a yellowish, whitish fur. And so they did the reasonable thing. They see this, and before it can turn around and survey that they're there, they turned around and hiked it right back down the path, got out of the eyesight of it, and went back to their cars. And did not return to Ferrystone for a good little bit after that. But again, right here in the area, I passed the exit for Ferrystone. Again, driving down here. I'm originally, so again, I came here from Salem today. I'm originally from Radford. So if you go the back way through Radford, you actually pretty much drive through Ferrystone. And so familiar with it that way. And so right here in the area, y'all have had one of the most rare cryptids, sheep squatch. And we have a documented sighting of it as well. Now, I have one more tale for you. And so it's the ghost story that I teased. And at first, I really wrestled, and I kind of got some of Hunter's help with this, because I was like, do I start here in Martinsville, or do I end it back here? So I decided to bring it all back home. If you are not familiar with the author Joe Tennis, he does a lot of ghost tales throughout Virginia, but especially our half of Virginia, the Southwest and Southside Virginia. And so he has a tale in his book about this very building. So I'm not going to necessarily museum-splain your own place to you. But 1824, this building's constructed. It is a courthouse until the 1990s, late 1990s. Now, in the early 90s, it is still being used as a courthouse, and there was a local attorney. There was a court days festival happening. I don't know if y'all still have that today, but if any of y'all remember back in the 90s when they had that, and if they still do. But they were having a court days festival, and so when the attorneys got here to get some stuff set up for that day. So she was here about 4 a.m. And she was downstairs in the front area where we came in, and she heard footsteps upstairs in the locked courtroom. So not only am I bringing it home to Martinsville, I'm bringing it home to this very room where we're at today. But she heard footsteps up here. And so she came up, investigated, called out, nothing. Never saw anything. Apparently there have been reports from attorneys working in here since about the 1940s and 50s and onward. There were attorneys that always talked about hearing footsteps and hearing things in this building, and then you go and investigate and there's nothing there. So even if you're from here in Martinsville proper, right here downtown, right near Main Street, you do have your local ghost legend here as well. So there's nothing definitive about who or what it could be. Maybe it's just some rabble-rouse or something like that. But you do have your own ghost legend right here in this courtroom. And so this is just, again, I'm sure some of you all have your own stories. You've heard your own legends of the nearby area. I do try to stick with ones that are pretty well documented, either online. Most of mine came from books today. So it was Joe Tennis, Haunts of the Virginia Blue Ridge Highlands, I think that's right, and then the Legends of Virginia Mountains by a man named Michaels. And so I try to do ones that are specifically documented, but I figured I would end right here. I figured this was a good talk for spooky season here in October, so thank you all very much for having me, and I would be happy to answer any questions, or if you all have any stories to share, I'd be happy to hear those too. Thank you all so much for having me today.
Hey. Yes, I got it. I was going to add to your story a little bit on the Mountain Rose Inn, the first topic, Joe D. Hart. And his wife's name was Daisy.
Okay.
And they built the Mountain Rose Inn in 1901. And I was executor for his grandson who died at 94 years old, Howard Smith. He lived in Stewart.
Okay.
And I remember when I went in there one day, I was talking to Howard. It was this funny looking like a double horn. It was on his dresser. His dresser came from Mountain Rose Inn. And I asked Howard, I said, what is that? And he said, that's a spirit trumpet. He said he built the Mountain Rose Inn in 1901, and about 1932, 33, they lost their son, George. He had 2 children. And Daisy, she went to Ohio to learn seance from the mediums. And she would take that spirit trumpet to the cemetery and talk to George and the grandmother, and you couldn't break her beliefs. Well, I got that spirit trumpet.
Oh, cool. Very
It's
cool.
in the Franklin County Museum.
Okay, gotcha.
So that was pretty interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Very cool. That's great. Yeah, that's a great tie-in.
Yeah, I can
Thank
send
you.
you a picture of that spirit
Please do.
trumpet with that if you want.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I'll give you my info at the end. But yeah, sounds good. Any other questions or anything? Yeah, I just tried to cover some of the fun ones.
Just wondered, is it fair to ask you yourself believe in these legends and cryptids and such?
I do. There's plenty of it that part of it is there's some of it we're just never going to know. So why not? Life's short. It's fun. Why not? The one distinction that I'll make is that there's the whole, is it just one Bigfoot and that's what everyone sees, or is it like a species, so like Sasquatch is like a species? That makes more sense to me. For me, it's fun. I love folklore in general, be it this kind of folklore or just more broadly. Just the ways that the stories that people tell. And the ways that communities come together and everyone has their local ghost stories and they have their haunted house on Main Street and all that kind of stuff. I love learning about that and the ways that communities come together, be it through counties or cities or whatever else. But the short answer is yes, I do. Anything else? Well, thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very good.
All right, everyone. Like Garrett said, if you want to discuss anything else or share your own ghost stories with him, he'll be around for a little bit later. I don't think we have too much more to promote before the end of the year, though, so I'll really quickly plug the next 2 talks that we have in this series. And I did forget, while I'm introducing Garrett, to introduce who I was. I'm his subordinate, so I needed to be on top of that first. I'm Hunter Haskins. I'm the secretary on the board of directors for the Martinsville-Henry County Historical Society. And so, again, we want to thank you so much for coming out for spooky season, but also encourage you to come out to some of our other lectures, including our next Sunday afternoon lecture, which will be a history of apple cider by our own Jake Abel. Jake is the proprietor of Scuffle Hill Brewing Company down over in Collinsville, and he'll be giving a talk all about apple cider or hard cider, the way that he manufactures it, and the history of it, not just in this local area, but in the United States as a whole. That will be on the 3rd Sunday, so going back to normal schedule. That'll be at 3 p.m. on Sunday, November the 16th, right here, same bat time, same bat channel, right here in the courtroom. And that's about it there. We're going to be looking forward to our December music program as well. But otherwise, thank you all one more time for coming out, and give it one more round of applause to our speaker, Mr. Chen. Thank you all. We'll be back. I'll bring it back. Yeah.
Made up for.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So Joe's and then I know Mike was his last name. We sell the Joe tennis balls. You can get a sign. We sell sign copies. Yeah, I'm the same. It's this. It's Trader Steals from the James Mountains.
They used to buy one.
And this one's great. This is a very nice one. It covers all over the place already. But it's all Appalachian. Anywhere really are actually Appalachian mountains. So it's a good coverage of Appalachian.
He told me the story many times. He said she would go to Ohio and read the meetings. I never heard it. That's what they did. Thank you very much. That's a picture of it.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I mean, Sam's is
Alameda, New York, people really believed it. And that's the only one, and I think George, Joe actually made it. I got a display out over the depots in the museum. I even got the history class.
Oh, nice. Cool.
And this is there on the story, Sunday,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've never seen one before, so thank you for sharing. Because I've read about them, like Victorian saints.
I've seen something that looks different. This one's about it was fascinating. Howard has a photograph of it. It was like a book. Yeah, you're a good speaker. I enjoy it.
Thank you. Well, I know we're getting towards the end of the year, but maybe I'll be back one day next year to do a
You're a
different
curator.
Please do. We're free to visit, so anytime you want to come.
You're unbelievable speaker.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I love public speaking, so I'm always happy though.
I do. I still have to. I used to try to do public speaking. But not. I want to read speak, but I forget.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I always have to have a notes, so
Well,
I get it.
you didn't read. You didn't read. See you later. Uh-huh. If you want me to send you a picture of a spirit trumpet,
Oh, yeah, let me.
if you got a car, not that you'll ever use it,
No, I would love to have that picture just to be able to look back on, because I haven't heard of it before, so
yeah.
I'm interested.
Linda, she researched where she was in your 30s. And actually, George was 35. And she never got over that death.
But yeah, no, please send me that picture, because I'd love to look
I
at it.
might have a few things that you want to do. You don't know.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out to hear it.
You want to ride down the elevator?
Yeah. I'll send you that picture.
Please, thank you. The main talk that I give is on this. So, I love it.